Hello, welcome to Gay Cruise and Travel Podcast with me, just Joey T. This week, we're back with more useful consumer advice. One of my Patreon subscribers asked if there are particularly good or bad places on a cruise ship from which to put or pick your stateroom. So, should you get a stateroom, select the stateroom that's at the front of the ship, in the middle of the ship, in the back of the ship, which deck should you pick? Because most cruise ships, it goes from deck 3 or so up to decks 12, 13, 14, 15, depending on the size of the ship. What are the things you need to look out for or keep in mind? Or what's like a guide to picking like a good cruise stateroom location? So I have done a podcast on my regular podcast, HSBSO, a long time ago. But for this Gay Cruise and Travel podcast, I want to do a new / updated version of that because I know a lot of you are either prospective cruisers looking to book some sort of cruise coming up soon. You might have gone on some cruises before and want to go on some cruises again. But especially for those of you that are maybe looking to take your first cruise or your second cruise and just want to know, is there any pros and cons to which part of the ship I should select my stateroom from? Well, today, this podcast episode is for you. So what I'm going to talk about is, I want to talk about at a high level, just very generally, because every cruise ship is going to be a little bit different. For the Atlantis cruises coming up later in the year and in the future, I think it could be something I could work into the episodes where, let's say there's going to be a cruise coming up in October. There's going to be an October cruise coming up with Atlantis on board a Virgin Voyages ship. And, right about now, as we get into the springtime, is probably a good time to actually book that cruise if you are interested. What I have heard is there seems to be pretty good demand for that particular October Atlantis Virgin Voyages cruise so far. There is another Virgin Voyages cruise with Atlantis coming up in May over Memorial Day weekend. That one I've heard is maybe not selling as well. But anyways, no matter what cruise you are looking to book yourself on, I'm just going to give high-level general advice today that you can apply to the vast majority of cruise lines and cruise ships. But maybe in the future, if I get a chance to talk about specific cruises with Atlantis, for example, coming up, then I can say, okay, for this particular Atlantis sailing on this particular ship, these are like the areas where you want to book and areas to avoid. But today, I'm just to give you the general template, the general guidelines that you can use and apply to any cruise line, any cruise ship that you may be looking at. So let's get started. I am going to use the Virgin ship kind of sort of on my laptop here. I've kind of got the Virgin ship info pulled up just as an example because with Atlantis, they are sailing the Virgin ships the most recently and also like this year, like over half the calendar, I think, are on the Virgin Voyages ships. So one of my earliest teenage obsessions was skincare. Instead of looking at toys in the kids section at the store, I was looking at moisturizers in the skincare section. As I grew up and navigated my sexuality, I saw that most of the beauty industry was aimed at feminine women, sometimes at masculine men, but everyone else was left out. It wasn't for someone like me. With Surf Labs, I wanted to create a fun skincare experience for everyone. I'm pretty sure your skin doesn't care how masc or femme you are or who you love, but I'm absolutely sure you need to take care of it. Check us out at surflabs.co, servelabs.co, and you can also find us on Instagram and Twitter at surflabs. One of the things to start looking for is where the venues are. The various entertainment and dance party venues is what I mean, okay? So on most ships, you want to see, okay, where's the pool deck? Okay, that's usually very easy to spot on most cruise ships because, it's like you can't really miss the pool deck, to be really honest. But usually on one of the lower levels, one of the lower decks, you're also going to get something that's like goes by maybe like some sort of common area. Okay, a lot of the times it's the same level where guest services is. So you're looking at a level where there's gonna be like retail, there's gonna be some restaurants or some services or things like that. Okay, so on Royal Caribbean ships, a lot of them, they have something called the Royal Promenade, which is usually the same deck that you embark and disembark from when you board the ship on the first day and that you get off on the last day. And it's basically like the concourse of the ship, if you will. It's got guest services, it's got some retail shops, it's got like some restaurants, some shopping, that kind of stuff. Like the main concourse. On most ships, there's like one deck where it's got this like main concourse lobby type of a thing. So that's usually another area where you want to be aware of. And a lot of ships have indoor entertainment venues as well. So most ships will have a theater, like a traditional theater with like stadium style seating and like a big stage at the front. Usually those are at the front or the back of the ship. There are also usually going to be some sort of flex indoor space. On the Virgin ships, for example, the theater space is also the indoor flex entertainment space. On some of the larger Royal Caribbean ships, they have the theater at one part of the ship, and in a completely separate part of the ship, they have a flex space. So on some of the Oasis class ships from Royal Caribbean, for example, they have something called Studio B, which is a flex space where you can sometimes have an ice rink there, or it could be like a makeshift theater, like a secondary theater, or it can be, they can clear it and have like a big dance floor in the middle where they can do bingo or a dance party at night. So a lot of ships have this type of a flex space as well. So whenever you look at where you want to be on the ship, that's the first thing I recommend you do. Where's the pool deck? Where's the main concourse? And where are the entertainment venues? Okay. Now, for me, I prefer to be at least 2 decks down, if not 3 decks down from the pool deck. Okay. If your room is right under the pool deck, you are going to be subject to some noise coming from your ceiling. Okay. Depends on like which exact part of the pool deck you're under. If the pool is literally like right above your head, you are going to get footsteps and the noises from that right above you in the ceiling. If you're the type that would sleep in or want some peace and quiet when you hang out in your room during the daytime, it's not nice for there to be the people that are sunbathing and around the pool deck right above your head. Okay? Because it's hard to predict which part of the pool deck you might be under when you pick a room. I would just say very generally, avoid the deck that's right below the pool deck if you can help it. My general rule is I want to have at least 2 decks between myself and the pool deck. So the pool deck is deck 15, okay? I want to be at least on like probably deck 12. I wanted to have like 2 decks between me. By the way, some ships don't have deck 13 because the number 13. So if you're on deck 12, you might only have like deck 14 in between you and deck 15 if deck 15 is the pool deck. Just take a quick look at the deck plans for that particular ship. But that's like the very first thing, the first guideline that I personally have. Do not be right under the pool deck because it could get noisy, especially if you're the type to like sleep in late after a party and you're going to maybe sleep in the morning time into the afternoon to have the music from the pool deck and then also have the footsteps from people like, sunbathing, walking around outdoors. That could get real annoying real fast. So that's the first guideline that I'm going to give you. The second guideline is for similar reasons for your peace and quiet in your stateroom. I don't want to be like right above or beside or below any sort of indoor venues. The theater, if on that particular ship, the theater only does theater shows and they're not going to turn it into like a dance party at night. There's like a separate flex space for doing that at some other venue. And then being around the theater is not the worst. But imagine if your room is right above the theater, and then not only do they have the shows that are going on in like from 7 to 10 or whatever, a lot of times they have practice in the theater during the day when you are not in the theater. You don't know about it, but like the people that are putting on the shows in the theater, during the day they practice. I've talked about Erotic as one of the must-see acts on a lot of the Atlantis cruises. One of the reasons that Erotic, their shows don't come on until like the last or second last day of the cruise is because they're spending the first 5 days of the 7-day sailing practicing. Because they have a bunch of equipment they have to set up for that particular ship. They're doing a bunch of practicing, a bunch of adjustments, a bunch of setup. And they're practicing during the day when you're at the pool or like when you're sleeping even, if you're sleeping late. So the theater is not only in use at night, it's also in use during the day for like other things as well. So, but just very generally, because you don't know what's going to go on at one of these venues, music, practicing, whatever have you, I would say just try to stay away from the entertainment venues as well. If that entertainment venue has like a dance party one of the nights, you don't necessarily want that. It's coming into your room if you, for whatever reason, wanted to sleep in early that night. Same thing for any other entertainment spaces you have. I talked about Studio B as an example on a lot of Royal Caribbean ships. You don't really want to be like right beside Studio B or right above Studio B or like right below Studio B. So that's an easy one. It's just look at where all these venues are. Don't be anywhere near them. Okay. So usually on most cruise ships, that puts you on like one of the middle decks. Okay. Pool decks obviously up high outside. And usually any indoor entertainment venues like Studio B, indoor flex spaces, the theater, and also the main concourse or promenade or whatever the cruise line calls it, those tend to be on a lower level, like decks 4 or 5 or 6, something like that. So usually in between is kind of the sweet spot vertically in terms of which deck you want to be on. So something like decks 8, 9, 10, 11, something like that is kind of sort of like ideal. Because you're also going to be going to these venues as well. You don't want to be right beside the venue. It's just like when you are looking for a place to move into when you move to a new city. Like you don't want to be right where the clubs are, but you want to be like walking distance to the club, right? Same logic here. So usually one of like the middle decks, like 8, 9, 10, 11-ish, give or take, that's kind of sort of like one of the best decks to start your search from because you're not right under the pool deck, but it's only like a few decks away. You're not super far away from like the promenade or one of the lower decks where some of the amenities are. So in terms of decks, it's probably going to be one of the middle ones. Now, front, midship, or back, okay? Usually on a cruise ship, there's going to be a set of elevators and stairs at the front and at the back. Some cruise ships might have even 3 sets. I think it's kind of a more rare setup. But most cruise ships that you might encounter, if you listen to this podcast, there's going to be a forward set of elevators and stairs, and there's going to be a rear set of elevators and stairs. What I usually like to do is you want to be close to one of the other because just for convenience. So if possible, you want to be close to either the front set or the back set. I mean, depending on which venues you might want to be a little bit closer to, that might sway you to maybe want to prefer being closer to the front set of the elevators and stairs versus the rear ones. For example, on the Allure cruise with Royal Caribbean that David and I just went on, David said he preferred to be closer to the front set of elevators and stairs because he likes being a shorter walking distance to the solarium where a lot of the nighttime parties happen, and the solarium is at the front. For me, it's like, I don't really care. We ended up being close to the rear set of elevators and stairs, and the Windjammer Buffet is at the back of that particular ship, and actually, I kind of really like that. It was literally like a 30 to 40-second walk between our stateroom to the buffet. So that was really nice for me. So there are different pros and cons. But generally, if you're close to some set of elevators and stairs, you kind of can't go wrong. Because most of the time, when you leave your stateroom, the likelihood is, if you take my advice and book one of the middle decks, those middle decks don't tend to have any amenities. Those middle decks tend to be just all staterooms. That means when you leave your stateroom, you're probably going to some sort of amenity. You're going to a restaurant, you're going to see a show, you're going to like get services, you're going to like a bar. most of the time when you leave a room, you are going to need to go to a different deck, which means you need to go to stairs or an elevator. So that's why you want to be close to some set of stairs and elevators where you are. If you're like dead in the middle of the ship, where you're kind of sort of like equal distant to like the front elevators and the back elevators, that just guarantees that you have to always be walking a sizable distance to get to a different deck. Whereas if you're only like a few rooms down the hallway from an elevator, it's never a long walk to go to a different deck. That makes sense, right? So that's like the second thing that's the second guideline is try to be close to a set of elevators and stairs. Usually there's a set at the front and there's usually a set at the back. Most of you probably have a facial cleanser and moisturizer already, so I want to tell you about Shield and Slay DP, which is an anti-pollution hydration spray I formulated specifically for my skincare line, Serve Labs. This is actually a product I've been looking for years now and haven't been able to find on the market, which is something that was a hydration spray but also has anti-pollution, antioxidant properties for your skin. Shield and Slay DP is the ultimate double protection defense for your skin, teaming up antioxidants, probiotics, along with hydrating ingredients to fend up environmental stressors and aggressors. You can use it as part of your daily skincare routine, but I've also designed it so you can use it while you're out and about, on an airplane, or whenever your skin feels dry, dull, or a bit worse for wear. All you have to do is spray it on. Check out Shield and Slay DP along with the rest of the Serve Labs skincare lineup at servelabs.co, servelabs.co, and you can also find us on Instagram and Twitter at ServeLabs. So those I think are like the two most important things. If all you do is just follow those two guidelines, again, number one, be on the middle deck and don't be like right above or below a entertainment venue of any sort, like the pool deck or the theater or some sort of like indoor flex space, or like a bar or restaurant or anything like that, or the promenade or the concourse. That's guideline number one. And guideline number two is just to be close to some set of stairs and elevators. And again, there's a set at the front, there's a set at the back on most ships usually. So if you follow just those two guidelines, on most ships, you're gonna be in like a very central yet quiet location, okay? Central as in it's not usually going to be more than like 3 or 4 decks away from some sort of venue or amenity that you might want to go to. But you're still going to be in a part of the ship that's quite quiet. So if there's a particular night where you want to turn in early, but therefore you don't want to hear the boom, boom, boom from the dance party that's happening at some sort of entertainment venue indoors or from the pool deck up above, you're not going to hear that extra noise. The next guideline I'm going to give you, it's going to be kind of sort of, it's a nitpickier one. It's, the rest of the advice is a little bit more like secondary. It's not as important. So just talked about the front and the back of the ship, right? So, if there's some sort of venue you see that you think you want to be closer to, then you go like at the front versus the back. So I gave you that example of like David wanted to be closer to where the dance parties are at night at the front of the ship. I didn't mind being closer to the back of the ship where it was closer walk to the buffet. That is one example. But if you're not too sure, what I would always say is be between the front and the back set of elevators and stairs. So like I said, ships usually have the front and the back set. There's 2 sets. Be somewhere in between, okay? Be as close as you can to the elevators and stairs, but try to select from between the front set of elevators and the back set of elevators. Because it might seem like a small difference. Well, if I'm close to the elevators and stairs, what difference is it going to be if I'm just, like in front of it or just behind it, looking at the map, right? On the bigger ship, it kind of makes a difference, okay? So let's say you're at the back of the ship, okay? And you are close-ish to the back set of elevators and stairs, right? But you're maybe about like, 8 rooms towards the back of the ship. So you're not in the middle of the ship. You're kind of like 8 rooms-ish behind the rear set of elevators and stairs, okay? You're like, well, 8 rooms down, that's not that far. I'm close-ish to the elevators, right? But you're technically at the back of the ship. You're behind the rear set of the elevators and stairs. there are going to be venues at both ends of the ship, especially if it's on a bigger ship. That's going to be kind of like you're walking basically from the back of the ship to the front of the ship. Whereas if you were 8 rooms in front of the rear set of the elevators and stairs, you're technically in the middle of the ship. And the middle of the ship is basically like between the 2 sets of stairs and elevators, okay? You're still 8 rooms away from stairs and elevators, but you're not in the middle of the ship, technically. You're much closer to the middle of the ship. So if you were to have to walk to the very tippy front of the ship for the theater or like whatever is up there, on a bigger ship, that extra distance you don't have to walk can make a sizable difference when you're having to do multiple walks in and out of your room every single day for like 7 days a week. Okay, it sounds like a minor difference. Like, what difference does it make to be 8 staterooms behind a set of elevators versus 8 staterooms in front? It adds up. It does add up. Unless you're one of those people like, oh, I want to get my extra steps in. I want to be far away from stuff. It's like, I've never met anyone that really wants to be further away from things on a cruise ship just to get the extra steps in. If that's what floats your boat, okay, girl, sure, I'll pop off. But my general advice is, my guideline number 3 is try to be between the 2 sets of elevators and stairs on the cruise ship at the front and back, i.e. be in the middle of the ship. Don't be behind the back set of elevators, and don't be in front of the front set of elevators, if you can help it. So that's kind of like my tip number 3. And I feel like if you just do those 3 things, no matter which part of the ship you pick, you're going to be like very central. You're going to have a quiet room for times when, you want to catch a nap. No matter what time of the day, it could be like in the middle of the day, you need to nap. You want to turn it early to like do a early shore excursion the next day. Or you're going to sleep into the afternoon because it was like a really jamming party last night and you partied later than you wanted. That basically, it's always nice to have your stateroom be in a quieter part of the ship, even if you are a party animal. Or if you're not, it's good for everyone. I feel like there's not really any situation or any type of cruiser where having your stateroom in a quiet part of the ship is not an advantage. I feel like it's always an advantage for anyone. So now that you know which part of the ship you probably want to book in, I'm going to talk a little bit about the types of rooms, because sometimes that could affect which part of the ship you get to choose, because not all types of rooms are available in all the different areas of the ship. The most popular type of room and the most numerous on most ships are the ocean balcony rooms, okay? So those obviously are on the side of the ship because you have a balcony that opens outside and you have a view of the ocean, okay? However, a lot of people, they book interior rooms, okay? Rooms with no windows and no balcony, actually no view even onto the outside. Interior rooms are some of the least numerous on most cruise ships, but they usually get snapped up first because those are also the cheapest, least expensive rooms to book at the same time. So usually it's the interior rooms that sell first. So if you want to get on a cruise, you don't really care about having a view, you don't care about having a balcony, you just want to get a room for like the least amount of money possible, almost always you're going to want an interior room. But interior rooms, because there's not that many of them, they're not everywhere on the ship. And depending on which ship you're on, sometimes interior rooms are only in the back of the ship, only at the front of the ship. There might not be any interior rooms that are in the middle of the ship like I recommended. So that's just something to keep in mind. I feel like ocean balcony rooms, they span the entire length of the ship. They run from the very front of the ship down to like the very back on multiple decks. So if you are going to go for the ocean balcony, it's like the ocean balcony rooms are on almost every deck, and they're at the front, middle, back, they're everywhere. But if you had your heart set on a different type of a stateroom, where it's an interior room, or it could be a quote-unquote ocean view room, or basically like any sort of view room, quote-unquote, where you have a window that looks out, but like it's not a patio. There's no patio door that opens up. You don't have a balcony, but you have like a window that looks out onto something, onto the promenade, onto the boardwalk, onto the ocean, whatever. Excuse me. So those rooms, those interior view rooms, and also the pure interior rooms that don't have any sort of window or patio at all, they're not at all the different parts of the ship. So that's just something you want to keep in mind. If you really have your heart set on like a something that's not a balcony room for whatever reason, you just have to remember that they're not going to be on every part of the ship. So on some ships, maybe it's only on certain decks that they have that type of a room. On some ships, it might only be at like the very front or very back they have those types of rooms. And that's going to limit your choices as to which part of the ship you're going to stay in. Maybe some of those rooms are only going to be right above the theater or like right below the pool deck. You know, some ships, especially some older, smaller ships, you know, they have some funky layouts and funky designs. That's not necessarily like a good or bad thing, but just something for you to keep in mind if you have your heart set on a particular type of room. And one of those types of rooms are suites as well. So these are like the fancier rooms. On some ships, the really fancy suites are only on certain decks, usually on some very high up decks like deck 15, 16, 17, whatever. It's almost like a very exclusive section of one of the very upper decks. Sometimes it's like above the pool deck, and it's like a mini deck. That's like deck 16, deck 17, whatever, where they have some of like the higher end suites. Honestly, if you're looking to book a suite, one of those like nicer suites that's on a suites only deck that's like higher up, I think this podcast episode probably doesn't apply to you because those exclusive suites, they are already sectioned off from like everything else. So it's already like pretty quiet where those are. There are sometimes, I have been on ships where some of those nicer suites are very, very close to the party venues. So I've been on ships before where there was this like really nice suite. A friend of mine booked it and I visited a few times. And they were like, they were at the front of the ship, but they were like right under like one of the hot tubs. So the hot tub noise they can kind of sort of hear. They were like party people, so they didn't care. But like I did kind of make a mental note, like, oh, this is like I can hear the hot tub upstairs when it was quiet in the room. And then there are sometimes some of the suites that overlook or are as close to an entertainment venue. Taking the Oasis class ships from Royal Caribbean as another example, at the very back of the ship, there are some suites, like two bedroom suites, for example, that have a balcony where you can see like the back of the ship. It's nice to see like the water trailing off the back of the ship. That's how far back they are. But it also overlooks the Aqua Theater and the boardwalk. And the Aqua Theater, they have some shows there in like the early to like mid-evening, but they also sometimes have some of the dance parties back there too, which may or may not be an advantage for you. So yeah, so some ships do have suites like that. But if you're booking a suite, I mean, I don't think that many of you listening to this podcast are probably looking at one of those fancier suites. If there's enough of you out there that are interested in booking a suite and want me to talk about how to book a suite on Atlantis and the pros and cons, tip me some money so I can afford to book a suite and I can report firsthand for you what that's like. But honestly, I feel like a lot of you that are actually generally in the market for a suite, I think you do fine no matter what suite you get because most of the suites are in prime locations. But for everyone else, those are the 4-ish. I think it's kind of like 4 tips that I gave you that I think you should keep in mind to get the best stateroom location no matter which cruise line or cruise ship you will be going on to make your next cruise vacation absolutely fabulous. If you have any questions about anything I talked about on this episode, or you have more specific questions about which parts of a cruise ship are good or not good to stay at, just comment below down on YouTube and I will answer those questions for you. But until next time, bye y'all.